Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There are two big impediments to a potential sale of Tata Steel. We'll deal with the massive pension burden in a moment. But the other, apparently, is the cost of energy for heavy industry in the UK, significantly more than what German firms pay. Industry, and not just the steel industry, says it's crippling. But is there an inventive way to tempt a buyer in through an energy deal, or is energy a red herring? Here's the Financial Times energy correspondent Kieran Stacey, who we asked to shed some light on the issue.
Among the attempts to save steelmaking at Port Talbot, one intriguing idea sits on the table. Supposing the government could lend a buyer the money to build their own gas power station on the South Wales site. The cripplingly high energy costs about which Tata has repeatedly complained would no longer be an impediment. Or so the argument goes. But how much are energy costs and the government's energy policy really to blame for the company's problems? The steel industry insists they are.
When steel companies are put under pressure and profit margins are squeezed or even wiped out completely, those fixed costs and those costs with regional variations like electricity become a much bigger issue. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years.
There is no question that electricity prices for heavy industry users in Britain are high. Higher, in fact, than any other country in the EU. The question is, why? One explanation is the subsidies given to renewables, such as wind and solar power. Take Germany. Like us, their subsidies are paid for by putting levies on everyone's energy use. But unlike us, the German government has given large industrial users €9 billion back on their bills since 2013. In that time, the UK has paid out just £160 million. Melting steel at temperatures of almost 1300 degrees C is unsurprisingly energy intensive. But how much of an impact do energy prices and green subsidies actually have on the costs of making steel? Of that 9.5 pence per kilowatt hour of electricity that UK heavy industry paid in 2014, this is how it broke down. The raw electricity accounts for 55% of the cost. Delivering it accounts for another 27%, supplier costs and profits are 3%, and energy and climate change policies account for 15%. Of the overall costs of running a blast furnace such as those at Port Talbot, electricity accounts for about 6%. Altogether, therefore, green policy accounts for around 1% of what it costs to melt steel at the South Wales site.
The figures you've seen are about electricity. We're talking in Port Talbot largely about gas. And gas is not affected by this at all, and British gas prices are about medium for the whole of Europe. So it can't be this, i.e. green taxes, which have affected the closure or the threatened closure of Port Talbot. There are lots of other things that could have done it, but above all, it is the international price of steel, which has plummeted by more than 60%.
The government could, of course, remove green levies altogether. It could, in the words attributed to David Cameron, cut the green crap. That would give you your 1%, maybe 2% saving on the cost of running a blast furnace. But compared to the 30% drop in the price of some steel products worldwide in the last year, I'm not sure that that's going to make the difference needed to save the British steel industry. It's possible that generous government subsidies could pull companies on the cusp of going under back from the brink. But it seems that in Tata's case, their problems run much deeper.
Well, that was Kieran Stacey. The other huge issue surrounding Tata and any potential buyer is the size of its pension burden. With me now in the studio is Steve Webb, who is Pensions Minister for the 5 years of the coalition government and who's talking about this in the Times tomorrow. Steve Webb, first of all, in your view, is any potential buyer going to take on the pension burden?
Looks pretty toxic to me. you've got enough trouble making money selling steel, if you're also worried not just about the cost of pension promises that have already been made, but the fact that the pension deficit could blow up again in the future if we all start living a bit longer, you just never know with a pension fund deficit. And I think any potential purchaser just wouldn't want that level of uncertainty.
So what would be the most likely outcome?
Well, in a normal situation, if a business is running and losing £1 million a day or whatever, and they become insolvent, then the pension fund, if it's short of money to pay its promises, which this one is, would go into something called the pension. How
short is this one?
Well, it changes by the day. That's one of the things. I mean, potentially billions on some measures, certainly £500 million on others.
It's 140,000 people involved. It's not simply the workers that are actually working for Tata at the moment.
That's right. You've got the people who are actively working, about 15,000, about another 30,000 who haven't retired yet and work for other people, and about 80-odd thousand who are already retired.
But if the money was into the pension protection fund, which I gather you think is the most likely option, then they're not going to get 100% of their pension, are they?
And the Pension Protection Fund is an excellent organisation. It's well run, it does a good job, but it doesn't replace every penny of the pension you were going to get.
So men and women are going to lose pension if it goes into the pension fund?
They are, and the hardest hit will be the longest serving.
So the hardest hit is the longest serving. Why? Just explain the issue. Apart from anything else, they're not going to get full payout. No one's getting full payout. I think the maximum is 90%.
So if you haven't reached pension age yet, you get 90%, but 90% of something, and the something is capped. So if you've worked in the industry, you know, man and boy, woman and girl, all your life, you could build up a pension, perhaps 40, 50, 60,000 a year, but the cap will take you down to 30-something. So you could lose potentially up to half of your pension.
So also you've got an issue with whether it was index-linked, and beyond 20 years back, it's not index-linked.
And again, it's the long-serving workers who lose out.
But you brought something in when DWP to try and amend this, and it's not been brought in. What did you want?
That's right. Well, I felt it was wrong to cap the long-serving workers. Sure, if you're a fat cat with a huge pension because you've just walked in and got a huge salary, that's not fair. But if you've got a decent pension because you've worked in the scheme all your life, it just isn't fair that it's capped so hard. So last year, the last government legislated to allow people who'd worked longer to get a bigger cap, but that hasn't been implemented yet.
So that is it's the cap plus 3%
for every extra year that you've been in the scheme. That's right.
And why hasn't it been implemented?
I guess it hasn't been a priority. To be fair to the new government, they've been doing other things, but now it ought to be a priority. If they're going to try and do right by the steel workers, then the long-serving workers need this higher cap.
And can I just be quite clear? There is absolutely no impediment to them doing this, for example, tomorrow.
There's detailed regulations to write which could be done in a matter of months. So before all of this happens, it could be done.
Now, one of the other possibilities, or one of the other ideas being floated, is the idea that the government, like it did with the Royal Mail, would simply take on the pension burden. And, you know, the EU rules would preclude that, do you think, or not?
It would be very challenging to say we're going to bail out an industry because it's a special case. And then if Steel said it's a special case, the government would be worried that the car industry, defence, aerospace, they'd be worried about the precedent. It's not they couldn't afford to, because actually this pension fund's got tens of billions of pounds in it. So today there wouldn't be a problem. The promises would have to be kept for decades to come. The worry, I think, is the precedent.
And what about EU?
And the issue there is you're not allowed to subsidise your own industries where they're competing with other people's, and the EU come down particularly hard on steel because the EU takes the view there's too much steel capacity. So it's hard to see that working for the government.
Steve Webb, thanks very much indeed.
I've been getting away with it all.